Hello and welcome to the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel, and on today's episode, I'm speaking with Mike and Dory, the hosts of the Othering podcast. They advocate for marginalized communities, focusing on disabled and LGBTQ plus people by providing a platform for their podcast guests to share their stories. Mike has a long history in internet radio and podcasting. 15 years ago, he ran his own radio network and several podcasts. Today, he lives with neurodivergence and several learning disabilities. Dory lives with complex regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. She's an ambulatory wheelchair user, has autism, ADHD, asthma, and several other disabilities. Mike and Dory, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I've been following your show for a while. I know we connected on social media, so I'm really looking forward to talking with you and learning more about the story behind your podcast and your own personal stories as well. So, I guess to start out, what inspired you to start the Othering podcast?
Well, it started because for a while we were trying to come up with something to do. We wanted to do a podcast. We missed doing the radio because we used to do it when years ago, and we wanted to do it again, but we couldn't figure out what exactly we wanted to do. We were thinking, do we want to start another radio network? And we were just like, no, that took too much time. And so then we started thinking about podcasts. And at first we were going to do just like a generalized podcast because so many people kept asking us, well, your children are so great and wonderful. How do you raise them? And it's like, well, okay, but there really isn't that much to it other than, we talk to them like they were children, like they were humans. So we were thinking about that and then we're like, that's not long enough. Then the regime came in and we decided, you know what, always when things go wrong, the first people that are always the first to unfortunately be hurt are disabled and LGBTQ plus people. And so we said, why don't we focus on them, especially since we're both disabled and I am also bisexual. So why don't we focus on that? And that's how we came about.
I'm going to say it was mostly her idea to start with because she has CRPS and is becoming, or was at the time, becoming an ambulatory wheelchair user. She was really feeling down and angry with the world. And she reached out on Instagram to find people in similar situations to find a community. And from there, that's where she started to get the idea and where it came from. And she proposed it to me and I thought it sounded great, but I questioned if we could get enough guests. So I told her, reach out to the people you're talking to on Instagram, see if there's interest in it. And we got really good feedback. So it kind of went from there. But yeah, it was all Dory to start with. And then I helped bring it to life.
Very cool. How long has the podcast been in production?
Since May of 2025.
Oh, wow.
So we've been doing it for a little bit and we've gotten a great response.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And the name is so interesting, the Othering podcast. Can you tell me about how you came up with the name and what that means in the context of the show?
That was all her again.
Well, growing up in a predominantly white area, all my life, made me feel like I was the other person, the token type of thing. And I never felt like I fit in. I didn't realize I had neurodivergence at the time, but I never felt like I fit in at all. It was always just like this feeling of I'm a shell of a person just looking in. And it made me always feel like an other person, not really a part of anything. And so when we were talking about how do we name this, I said, well, they always talk about everybody being an other, different from the main group that's supposed to be the one that we want to be like. And so it made sense to name it Othering Podcast because we're the other people and, we're not going down silently.
And I said, that sounds awesome and it'll work for marketing. So let's go with it.
All right. Yeah, totally see the connection there. And with both your own experiences and it sounds like the experiences of the guests that you host on your podcast. Yeah. when I was doing your introduction, talked very briefly about some of your own lived experience of neurodivergence and disability. And I'd love to learn more about how you share that lived experience on the podcast. I know you do a lot of interviews, but how do you share it from yourselves?
Yeah, I feel like that's a very important part of our podcast to show that we're on their side, that we know what we're, I guess, to not sound mean, but we know what we're talking about. We've been through it. So we'll throw in our stories of the way that things have affected us, especially Dory. She does a lot of the talking, a lot more than me. So she'll talk a lot about her CRPS or being in a wheelchair and such. And then with mental health, which is more of where I fall in with depression, bad depression and anxiety. And then as stories kind of unravel, I can talk to my lived experience to help show I understand and guide the conversation that way.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And Dory, I know you shared your story about having CRPS. And I think one of the important things is, a lot of times people are born with disabilities, but other times acquire them as well. And I feel like CRPS is not something that's really that well understood in the general public. And I know you acquired that later in life. So I know there's a story behind that as well.
Yes, I'm a klutz. Let's start with that. I have always had some sort of crutches or cane growing up in my house. In fact, like it was just within the last 5 years, my parents finally got rid of my collection of crutches from when I was growing up. I always sprained my wrists and my knees and my ankles because like I said, I'm a klutz. If the leaf gets in my way, I will trip over it. And playing sports, I, fell down a lot. So that also caused a lot of sprains. And it was the one sprain that just caused it all to happen was I was playing soccer with our kids in the front yard, and I found the one hole that nobody else has managed to find except me. And I twisted my ankle. It was one of those really bad high ankle sprains. And it just never got better. I had to be in a boot for about 2 months, and it wasn't completely torn, so there was no need for surgery, but it just never healed right. And it kept getting worse. That happened in 2012. And then it was about 2017 when, after a bunch of tests to make sure that my blood was flowing correctly and my nerves were right and all of this stuff, that they decided that based on exclusion that I had CRPS. It's not a new disease syndrome, but it's been around, and it was first talked about during the Civil War when patients were, having these mass casualties and mass events of disablement, and it just never was researched since then. And usually a lot of veterans, those types of people end up with it. And for some reason, I don't know why, but they still just didn't research it much. It's starting to now get more of a highlight of it, a spotlight, But for me, it started in my ankle and then it spread to my knee. And now it's in both of my legs from the knee down.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where, like, sometimes the day I'm good, I could probably, clean the kitchen and clean the whole house up at top to bottom, and I'd be fine. And then, of course, I would pay for it, the next few days.
And so would I.
Yes, you would. And it's one of those things where you have to learn your limits, but it's tricky because sometimes it doesn't tell you exactly. Some days you can do it, and then other days, if you even think about doing something, the pain, just radiates and causes you to have to lay down or just give up on that day.
Yeah, I think that conditions like CRPS and other chronic pain conditions and autoimmune conditions and related disabilities that are chronic but not always the same intensity every day. Yeah, that's something that, I definitely heard from guests more and more on my show when I talk with them. And I think, again, it's something that people need to understand a little bit better. Even the concept of like ambulatory wheelchair users is that, people don't have to need a wheelchair 100% of the time or 0% of the time. There is like a flux depending on people's pain and energy levels.
Right. I mean, and even if you are paralyzed, you can still move sometimes. I mean, it depends on the type of injury that you have. But yes, ambulatory wheelchair users exist. We can sometimes move our feet. We can, stand up. It just, whether or not you can stand up for long periods of time or even walk for periods of time. Like for me, I cannot walk for long periods of time. It just, my body gives out, and now it's to the point where my legs will give out on me.
Wow.
And I will fall, and which exacerbates the problem even more. So it's better if I, stay to a wheelchair if I have to go for far distances, or sometimes even just short distances.
Yeah, I think that's definitely important for people to realize that there are those differences in people's ability, sometimes depending on your energy and your pain level and all of that. In terms of how you select the guests that you talk with on your show and the topics, how do you go about doing that? I know you mentioned that at first you were reaching out to people who had reached out to you on social media, but are you still, now that you've been a few months into the podcast, are you still doing that? Are you getting more spontaneous requests for people to be on?
Both. We'll reach out to guests that, like, say we find someone or start talking to someone that we really like. We'll reach out to them and invite them on the show, or a dream guest, someone certain that we were looking for, we'll invite them. We've gotten a lot of guests just by putting a post out on social media saying we're looking for guests. A lot of them come that way, and some just come to us at random. So it's a little bit of everything. As far as criteria, it's basically if you're disabled and or LGBTQ or even strong advocates, we will talk to them as well.
Yeah. And I have to say, especially for a new show like yours, you have had some amazing guests on with like huge profiles. You had Joseph Kibler on, who is someone that I love following and absolutely love his content. So that was an amazing episode. And I think I saw, do you have Michael Threets coming on soon?
Yes, we do.
That's awesome.
January.
He's coming.
22nd.
Yes, the 22nd.
Oh my
22nd.
goodness. Yeah. So that's really cool. And for those who may not know, he's the new host of Reading Rainbow. Yeah. He's just such a wonderful, warm, and extraordinary personality. And I follow him on social media too. So I'm looking forward to that episode. So yeah, kudos.
He's extraordinary. He's just so wonderful.
Great person.
In fact, all of our guests have been just amazingly wonderful people. Honestly, I've learned so much from them.
Me too.
And they give so much of their time, and I can't stop gushing about them because I get to talk to them. And like, I feel so blessed to be able to talk to them. And of course I fangirl over pretty much all of them because like I see them as, a lot of them have major followings, or in their own right, they're famous. And I think it's just amazing that they're taking the time to talk to us about important topics and, humanizing these groups of people that are always the first to be dehumanized is honestly, just like a thrill.
And kudos to you for doing that reach out, because, it's a reminder to all indie podcasters is that if you admire someone, you really want them on your show, sometimes just reach out. Like the worst they can say is no or have no response,
Yeah, there are plenty of people that have just not responded at all to us. Omer said we can't do it right now, or we have to do it at this time, and it didn't work for us. It goes every way, but doesn't hurt to try.
Yeah, it never hurts to ask. I mean, if you don't ask, then it's always a no.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. When you have your discussions with your guests, do you talk a lot about the intersections with, disability, neurodivergence, LGBTQ identity with other parts of your identity?
Yes. That's important too, because we like talking about that because so many times, so many things intersect. It could be the color of your skin or your height or just your gender. And so many things intersect in our lives normally. The fact that, when we were researching whether or not we were going to do this and what the name of it all was and how would we stand out. The important part was the intersectionality of, yeah, you might be LGBTQ, but you're also a human. You know, what is that other part of you that makes you you? And, you know, some of them have been Black, some of them have been Hispanic, some of them are mixed race. And those are important aspects of these people as well, because you can't just isolate one aspect of somebody. Nobody is just one thing.
And there are episodes where we will talk for half an hour just about like what they do as a singer or as a comedian and never really mention the disability. Like Dory said, just to show that they're human. They're different than everybody else. They're just a human and just as beautiful as everyone else.
Yeah, that's really important to be able to highlight. You know, one is to show humanity and help destigmatize and just help people understand that, you know, people in the end are people, while also recognizing that the identities that you hold impact the way that you live and move through society. So, you know, the experience of like a late diagnosed white autistic straight woman like me is different from, you know, a Black autistic boy who lives in a different part of the country. There are just different things that we're subjected to, and our experiences are different.
Yeah. And all these different podcasts are so important to spread the word and to share the stories. Yours, ours, all of them are equally as important to get the word out there.
Yeah, and to shed light on, you know, parts of the world that don't always get a chance to have a voice. Because a lot of times, you know, you're silenced because you're female, or you're silenced because you're short, or a little person, or, you know, you're just too tall. And, you know, there's always a to something. And we all get to highlight those people that are on the outskirts, so to speak, or that are othered, and bring their stories to light. And I think all of that is important, even if it's just as mundane as you work in New York City and walk along Fifth Avenue type of thing. And, you know, all of those stories are important to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we need to understand the full breadth of people's experiences. It helps towards acceptance and understanding towards the end. Absolutely. What are your favorite kind of guests to interview on your podcast, if you have a favorite?
Honestly, like just everybody. We've had such luck in finding incredibly gracious people, and all of them are incredibly just brilliant in what they're doing. I love talking to artists because they are always quirky and funny, you know, like Joseph Kibler. He's funny. I love his crypt tips.
Love those.
And authors are really great. And actually, all of them have been artistic people, which is another aspect of importance, because art helps us, you know, see life in a different way instead of just your one point of view. Not that that's not important, it is, but sometimes it's nice to see what other people see when they're looking at the same horizon or the same story. You know, how do you see it? And all of them have been able to share that with us. I have to admit that some of my favorite ones were British, because I am obsessed with the British accent. I love the British accent, so I do have to admit that part. Otherwise, I love talking to everybody, and anybody is welcome to talk to us, because it's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And yeah, that's cool that you get to talk to people from different parts of the world as well. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So, you know, you've been in production for, at the time of this recording, a couple months. What kind of feedback have you received about the Othering podcast so far?
It's 99% been really, really, really good. We had one little drama episode, but that's in the past. But otherwise, it's been really good. A lot of positive feedback. We're actually on 3 internet radio stations, being broadcast on 3 different internet radio stations. One that's based out of South Africa.
Wow.
And it's in the works that it may be broadcast on FM in Pennsylvania later this year.
Oh, that's really
So
cool.
it's really got a lot of good feedback and a lot of good progress.
And, the one mishap that we did have, we fully owned up to it. And I just want to say, sometimes mistakes happen and nobody's perfect. Nobody's ever going to be perfect. And we have to sometimes give ourselves grace when we mess up and just own it and move on.
Yeah, I think at some point in time, if you're doing a show like this where you're talking about, different important social issues that people have strong opinions on, at some point there's always something that you experience a situation where you can learn from other people and learn more. And as you said, own it and move on and learn from it. And I think that's important because I think that's hard for a lot of people to do, at least from what I observe on social media. And yeah, it's important because, if you hold back and you're afraid of saying the wrong thing, then you're really not sharing your full gift of interviewing and sharing your true story. And, you can't be afraid to make mistakes. And as long as you own them and learn from them. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
other people learn from our mistakes too. So then that way they know going forward, okay, this is what I don't do. And, to insult somebody or, to hurt somebody's feelings, and which is what we don't want to ever do. But, sometimes unfortunately, you get into the heat of things or you're not always paying attention to certain things and you do make those mistakes. And, like you said, it's important to share those mistakes because then it shows that we're human.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're always learning, or we always should be learning anyway. So,
Yes.
and that's important.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And if you think you already know everything, then you're no fun.
exactly. Yeah. No one wants to hear from someone who knows like every single thing already.
You're
So,
right.
Yeah. Long term, what are your goals for the Othering podcast?
To make a difference.
Yes. To make a difference and to take over the world.
Yes.
But in a way to conquer the world in the good way, into making a difference so that everybody in every corner has a chance not only to share their voice, but to also force countries into understanding that there are going to be people who are LGBTQ plus. There are people who are going to be disabled. And no matter what, we're always here. We're always going to be here. And if you're so focused on worrying about disabling things, then make life better. Stop trying to do wars. Stop trying to force people into boxes that just don't fit because you're just making more disabled people.
And we want millions of listeners because we want to make the difference, not for the money. We'll take the money, but we don't want it for the money. We're not in it for the money. We're in it to make that difference and to be heard, or a guest to be heard. So that's why we push so hard and promote so hard for it.
And because we don't want any more regimes.
It's tiring.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things about podcasting is that anyone can set up a show. There's not a lot of gatekeeping. It doesn't rely on one particular social media platform or a corporation. And it's important to get other voices out there because sometimes the loudest voices are not, well, let's just say, the most helpful voices or the ones that have the best intentions.
Right. And the quiet people deserve to be heard too. And they always talk about the silent majority, and we need to stop being silent.
Yeah.
I'm a very introverted, always been a very shy, quiet person, which, as you probably, if you listen to the podcast, you notice who talks a lot more, that one. But having done internet radio and now doing this, and especially with this, I've just learned so much about how much of a difference one voice can make. Like for a long time, I was one of those people where I didn't quite understand the difference of one person. What good is that doing? That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But now I understand that it's not just you. A million people are just one person. That's a million people. So I understand it makes such a difference to have that one voice and to go vote, that one vote, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It makes the world of difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I think especially now it's important to remind people that they do still have a voice, and you should use it however you're able to, certainly by voting, and if you want to do something like start a podcast or even just write or share or talk to your friends and family and neighbors, it's important to not be that silent majority, because you're right. That usually is what happens, is that the few loud voices are the ones that tend to shape policies. So
Yeah, and we can't have that anymore.
Yeah.
We don't want regimes. We fought against it over 80 years ago, and we don't want that again. We have to keep talking, and we have to keep raising our voices so that more and more people are like, oh my God, they're right. They are human. Why are we allowing this to happen?
Yeah. And I think in talking about regimes is that one source of power for regimes is making people feel hopeless, like nothing they say or nothing they do can make any kind of difference at all because they're just one person and they're up against someone so powerful. But, altogether, if we're doing even small things, whatever we're able to, that's how regimes get changed. That's how social policies get changed. That's how it works. So just to remind people that they still have that power and to not give up hope, because that's probably the worst thing you can do.
Exactly.
That's what they want, is you to give up hope, because when you have no hope, you just become complacent.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we keep, there's always going to be that one person that says something and that sparks something in somebody else. And if we can end up being a part of that spark, then I realized my main goal is that I've sparked other people into action. I've sparked other people into realizing that they are worthy, and that no matter what people say to them, even if they don't understand or whatever, that there is always a community that does.
Just like the protests. If so many people go out, it makes a difference. And same with just being on a podcast. If enough people speak up, say something, it makes a difference.
And the other thing is that we have to realize that to make change, it's not always marching in the street. Sometimes it's putting up a flyer. Sometimes it's just being the person that they can call. It could be that simple. And, every little thing counts and every little thing helps, whatever you're able to do. And, a lot of times when these marches and things happen, they always neglect to include disabled people.
Yeah.
And we have to be a part of that too, because we're the largest minority ever.
Mm-hmm.
And all it could be as simple as the government decides that you are disabled. They could say that even if you are not in any way, shape, or form, but if they decide you're disabled now. And so you should always want to strive to make sure that the disabled people are okay, because you can at any point be included in that group.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to be tied up and, held down and stripped of your humanity, think about the ones that really are disabled.
Yeah. And that's not just a theory. That is part of the history of this country, is dehumanization of disability and extending disability to other more marginalized groups, so that even if you're not disabled, you fall under that classification, and now you are someone that the regime does not want to have rights or civil rights or human rights. So yeah, it really is important for people to listen to disabled voices, and certainly in a lot of ways include people who are more marginalized. And I know some of us may have woken up and be like, oh my God, what do we do? What do I do? Well, there are plenty of people, plenty of organizations who are already doing the work, and plenty of people who could totally use your help, whether it's making flyers or writing letters or donating money or just being there for support or doing childcare, like anything. There are people doing that work, and they could absolutely use your help. You don't have to start your own thing. They need it.
It could be as simple as baking a casserole.
Yeah.
If that's what you can do to help, because, it keeps fueling people. And, even if it's just to make ribbons, that's good too.
Yeah.
Every little thing helps, because you're giving somebody hope. And if you can give just one person hope, that person can then give another person hope. And it spreads. It doesn't have to be, hang gliding off of the Empire State Building. You don't have to do that. And it has to be within your ability, because if you burn yourself out, that doesn't help either.
Absolutely. Pace yourself with all of this, because it can be overwhelming. It sounds like you're doing really amazing work with the Othering podcast. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about the Othering podcast?
You can listen pretty much wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, all the different places. You can visit our website at otheringpodcast.com, and you can contact us through there. There's a form on there, and we're all over social media at Othering Podcast, and maybe othering.podcast on TikTok, I think. I don't remember.
I don't know.
I can't keep track of them all, but you'll find us. And thank you so much for having us today and talking to us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll put a link to your website in the show notes so people can probably get to your socials and your podcast and your show from there. Dory and Mike, is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know as we close out, or anything they can help or support you with?
Just keep fighting. Keep getting up every day. Keep waking up. Find a way to smile and laugh, because that helps so much on so many different levels, not just fighting fascism, but fighting that overwhelming darkness that sometimes comes with learning about yourself with a disability or just being different.
Yeah, that's an important reminder. It's okay to feel joy. And in fact, it's important to find those moments of joy and peace and rest and self-care, especially in times like these.
Yeah, because it's radical. It shouldn't be, but it is.
It is, yeah. And in our society that really prioritizes being productive, it sometimes is not looked on as valuable, but it truly is. So, yeah.
We can't produce anything if we become stones. You can't, like the saying, you can't squeeze blood from a stone. So, if you are too tired or you can't think or things like that, you can't produce anything. But even if you can't do anything and you're bedbound, you're still worthy.
Absolutely. And I know there have been virtual protests sometimes if you are literally bedbound. So there are ways to get involved with that too.
There are bed-ins, there are sit-ins that, all of that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah. Well, Mike and Dory, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great. And congratulations on the success of your show. I'm looking forward to hearing more episodes.
Thank you.
Thank you.